Hey everyone, Dave Jackson here, ESPN rules analyst on ESPN Hockey, and you're listening to the Sports Circus.
Welcome to the Sports Circus. I'm your ringmaster Sal, live from Las Vegas in the MTV studio, AAMP Television. Today's show is brought to you by UppercutChops.com. Check out their tasty selection of all-natural, dry-aged USDA Prime Angus and Wagyu steaks and chops. Wait till you taste the difference in these versus what you find at your grocery store. Gotta tell you folks, when you taste those New York steaks, the filet mignon, of course the king of all those massive cowboy cut and tomahawk cut ribeyes, the short rib of beef are good. I mean, really good. Best I've ever had. And those half-pound burgers will blow you away. Check them out at UppercutChops.com. That's UppercutChops.com. Or give them a call. Find out what's for dinner. 714-948-0100. 714-948-0100. 714-948-0100 for UppercutChops.com. All right, a big welcome in everybody listening in on our CBS, NBC, and Fox Sports affiliates and independents from coast to coast. Everybody watching Cox, Comcast, Spectrum, Frontier, Oceanic, Time Warner, Spectrum, Wild, Charter, and independent cable affiliates in select markets. Thanks for joining us there, as well as Hotel TV where applicable. And everybody on those streaming platforms and on Chicago Food Favorites on Facebook. Check that out, folks. Chicago Food Favorites, a fun group. Talk about your favorite restaurants, favorite recipes, your favorite foods. Makes your friends have some fun. Chicago Food Favorites on Facebook. And our friends over at Vacation Buddies are giving away a couple of nights in Las Vegas, Orlando, Florida, or Branson, Missouri if you can answer this simple trivia question. Now, let's see what you got. All right. Which of these NBA superstars won 6 NBA titles? Is it A, Magic Johnson, B, Larry Bird, C, Shaquille O'Neal, or D, Michael Jordan? If you know the answer, call 888-576-5777, 888-576-5777. Vacation Buddies is not affiliated with this station, but they want you to have a shot at a couple of nights in Vegas, Orlando, or Branson, Missouri if you know the answer to this simple trivia question. And if so, call 888-576-5777. All right. Always a big applause. We like the big applause. And I'm going to take a little bit of look at some baseball facts, figures, history, and so forth. Why? I'll tell you why in just a moment, because this one's going to get a little bit hairy, and I'll tell you that right now. There are some things going on that, frankly, I don't like, and let's just start off with a little bit of history, just in case you need a history lesson. If not, just play along. Now, Major League Baseball formed in 1876 and 1901, respectively. National League and American League cemented their cooperation with the National Agreement in 1903, making Major League Baseball the oldest major professional sports league in the world. And they remained legally separate entities until 2000, when they merged into a single organization. That's right, a single organization led by Commissioner of Baseball. And the current guy, well, we'll get to him in just a little bit. And of course, for all you people that like a little bit of history in baseball, and for Mr. You Know and all of our other friends, baseball's first professional team was the Cincinnati Red Stockings, founded in 1869. So the first few decades of professional baseball saw rivals between leagues, and players often jump from one league to the other and one team to another. And of course, these practices were essentially ended by the National Agreement of 1903, in which the American League and National League agreed to respect each other's players' contracts, including the contentious reserve clause, which bound players to their teams. That's right. And in fact, if you don't know, the reserve clause in North American professional sports was a part of players' contracts which stated that the rights to players were retained by the teams upon the contract's expiration, and players under the contracts were not free to enter into another contract with other teams. So basically, once you sign, you're locked in. Now, between 1900 and 1920, of course, that was the dead ball era, and basically the baseball is like a beanbag. And frankly, that went on for a hell of a lot longer than 1920, and I'm going to say all the way through maybe to the 1950s. But then again, I wasn't alive at that time, and you probably weren't either. But there were some pretty interesting things that happened, and we have to think about the idea of teams moving to different cities. In the 1950s and 60s, the American National League added 8 clubs in the 1960s, 2 in 1961, 2 in 62, 4 in 1969. Players discontinued. They really weren't very happy with established labor practices, especially the reserve clause. And of course, that led to Major League Baseball Players Association to collectively bargain with owners, which in turn led to the introduction of free agency in baseball, which changed the face of baseball forever. Modern stadiums with artificial turf surfaces began to change the game in the 1970s and 80s. Home runs began to dominate the game in the 1990s. I wonder why. Maybe the ball was a little bit tighter wound or something to the effect. I don't know. Maybe it was juiced a little bit in the mid, or maybe the players were juiced, if you know what I mean.
Show me the money!
And I'll show you a long ball. Okay. But the reality is home runs began to dominate the game at that time. Media reports disclose anabolic steroids. Remember about that whole thing with the whole steroid thing? That's why people have a problem with certain players and whatnot, and that was in the mid-2000s. And 2006 and 7, as a matter of fact, investigation produced the Mitchell Report, which found that many players had used steroids and other performance-enhancing drugs, including at least one player from each team. Imagine that. So Major League Baseball is a very wealthy professional sport. They have plenty of money. As a matter of fact, it's had its highest total season attendance of any sports in the world. In 2024, it drew 71 million spectators. All right, so let's get the handy-dandy calculator out. Let's go 71 million. That's right, 71 million. And the average ticket price, we'll just call it $20, right? That looks like almost $1.5 billion just in ticket sales alone. Never mind, they've had the MLB draft chaos. As far as, when I say chaos, it's just like a big event now. The World Baseball Classic, the World Baseball Softball Confederation. There's all kinds of things going on here. And when you look back to the founding back in the 1860s, you say, all right, well, it was basically aided by soldiers playing the game in camp during the Civil War, right? New York style of baseball expanded into a national game and spawned baseball's first governing body, the National Association of Baseball Players. Not baseball, but baseball, 2 words. So that's the NABBP. So they existed as an amateur league for 12 years. By 1867, more than 400 clubs were members. That's a lot. And most of the strongest clubs remained those in the northeastern U.S. for professional baseball. The founding year, of course, 1869, when the first team, of course, being the Red Stockings, were established. But you got to realize this goes back to the Civil War. And then you look about 1876, the National League of Professional Baseball Clubs, later known as the National League, was established after the NA, we'll just call it the NA, proved ineffective. And now what was the NA? That is the National Association. Remember the National Association of Professional Baseball Players? They just formed the NA. That was formed actually in 1871. But the reality is 5 years later, it proved to be ineffective. The National League kind of took over from there, and a concert was really made to curb gambling on games, which was leaving validity and the results in doubt on these games. So the first game in the National League, April 22, that was a Saturday of 1876. Of course, I wasn't around, at Jefferson Street grounds in Philadelphia, often pointed as the beginning of Major League Baseball. And of course, we're going through this for a very good reason. Look, there is a lot of history in Major League Baseball. It goes back 150 years. And there's other leagues, the Federal League, the Union Association. There's all kinds of neat stuff going on. And I mean, the Negro League was a part of it. And then you have the Negro Southern League, the East-West League, the Eastern Colored League, the Second Negro League. There's all kinds of leagues, and frankly, there's a lot of great players in those leagues, too, that did not get the recognition that they should have. Now, back to that dead ball thing, they say, being the powers that be, and historians that is, the dead ball era, 1900 through 1919, I don't necessarily believe that at all. But yes, the ball was sort of like a beanbag back in the day. And they say, well, the term also accurately describes the condition of the baseball. So the baseball used in American, rather than the modern Australian wood yarn, was not wound as tightly, affecting the distance that would travel. And more significantly, balls were kept in play until they were mangled, soft, and sometimes lopsided. And during this era, a baseball cost $3. That's a lot of money. That's basically $54 in our times, maybe $55. And the owners were reluctant to buy new baseballs. So fans were expected to throw the foul balls back and, of course, on home runs, in case you didn't know that. So never mind the souvenir. Well, let's face it, ticket prices today cover the cost of baseballs. That's why there's seemingly an endless supply of baseballs at these games. I don't know how many they bring. I'm going to guess maybe 100 to 150 baseballs ready per game, each game in today's time. So we are going somewhere with this, folks. It's not just a history lesson. And when you understand where we're going with this, you're like, aha, are we really at that position? Are we ready to make those changes? Back here in a few minutes on The Circus. Lots more to come. Don't go anywhere. I'm your ringmaster Sal of the Sports Circus, a primetime, nationally syndicated television, radio, sports, and entertainment show. The Sports Circus covers topics others are too scared to talk about. There's no other primetime show like it on here that'll punch you in the face and you'll beg for more. Join me, Hall of Famers, world champions, and all-star celebrity guests for chaos and controversy here on Libsyn and all podcast platforms, plus thesportscircus.com. Remember, folks, it's a circus and we prove it every day.
Why pay retail for your next car? Just visit beepinautos.com to find your new-to-you car or truck. They find cars for people, even when cars are hard to find. So just go to beepinautos.com and click on Find Me a Car, and they find your perfect car on the wholesale market. Beepinautos.com. They're a car concierge. Beepinautos.com. B-E-E-P-I-N autos.com. Beepinautos.com. Now you have a friend in the car business when you need it most. Trusted since 2013. Just click Find Me a Car at beepinautos.com.
If you'd like to borrow up to $100,000 and get pre-approved in minutes, call the number we'll give you at the end of this commercial. Our lending partners have already loaned millions of dollars to individuals just like you, and we're ready to lend you up to $100,000 if you qualify. Even if your credit is not perfect, you could use the money to pay off high-interest credit cards, for home renovations, or consolidate existing debt. You can get flexible, easy-to-pay terms. The consultation to find out if you qualify is free. To find out if you qualify for our special financing program, call this toll-free number 24 hours a day. 800-335-1376. 800-335-1376. 800-335-1376. That's 800-335-1376. Important terms and conditions apply. Not all applicants will qualify. Loan amount, annual percentage rate, and term will vary depending on creditworthiness. Applying does not guarantee approval. Account approval is subject to verification and confirmation of your credit history and acceptance by a lender. If you choose to apply for a loan through us, a consumer report will be obtained to evaluate your creditworthiness in connection with your application for credit.
That's the sound of sizzling, dry-aged USDA prime Wagyu and Angus steaks from UpperCutChops.com. Their best-in-class filet mignons, New York steaks, and the king of all steaks, the tomahawk and cowboy cut ribeyes are the best in the business. Even their prime Wagyu burgers will likely be the best you've ever had. Browse the full selection of steaks and chops at UpperCutChops.com from the comfort of your home or on your mobile device. UpperCutChops.com delivers all-natural, dry-aged USDA prime Wagyu and Angus steaks and chops directly to your door. store without the hassle of going to the grocery store and fight crowds to pick from a small selection of average at best meats with injected steroids, fillers, and coloring added to look good. Find out what's for dinner at uppercutchops.com or call 714-948-0100. 714-948-0100. 714-948-0100. Or make your selection directly at uppercutchops.com.
Welcome back to the Sports Circus. I'm Roy Firestone. Now it's time to throw it back to Sal.
Thank you, Roy, and welcome back to the Sports Circus. I'm your ringmaster Sal, live from Las Vegas in the AMP TV studio, AAMP Television. This segment brought to you in part by our friends over at the College of Southern Nevada Athletics. Check them out at csncoyotes.com for upcoming games and events. That's csncoyotes.com for the College of Southern Nevada Athletics. And welcome back to everybody listening in on all of our affiliates, including our friends over in Atlanta. Thanks for waking up with us on WDJY 99.1 FM over in Montgomery, Auburn, and Columbus, Georgia. Montgomery, Alabama, Auburn, and Columbus, Georgia. WAUD, home of the Atlanta Braves. Thanks for driving home with us. Down through the heartland, out to the West Coast. Highway Country Radio, 101.5 FM and 107.3 FM. Thanks for driving between LA and Vegas and listening to us up and down Interstate 15, along with probably about 1 million other people. I've been on that drive probably a couple, 300 times. Also, hello to our friends all the way up to Seattle and Alaska, down to Honolulu, CBS Sports 1500 KHKA. That's home of the Yankees, 49ers, and the Alabama Crimson Tide. Plus, welcoming everybody on Cox, Comcast, Spectrum, Frontier, Oceanic, Time Warner, Spectrum, Wild Charter, and independent cable affiliates in select markets, plus Hotel TV where applicable, and everybody listening in on those streaming platforms, Apple, Amazon, Audible, Spotify, iHeart, Stitcher, Deezer, YouTube, you name it. We're there. You can't get away from us. Also on Chicago Food Favorites on Facebook. Check that out. Chicago Food Favorites. Fun group. Talk about your favorite foods, restaurants, and recipes. Thanks for friends. Have some fun. Chicago Food Favorites on Facebook. All right. Now back with this baseball. It's not really a history lesson, but I want you to follow along here because I am going somewhere with this. Back in the day, way back in the day when they had the dead ball era, well, as I had mentioned in the previous segment, foul balls were expected to be thrown back. Home runs were expected to be thrown back to be able to use the balls again. And I don't know about you, but if you've ever picked up an older baseball, I mean, there's all kinds of soft spots on it. There's scuff marks on it, and the ball gets darker. It's a little harder to see. You can't see the threads so much on it, so it's hard to see the seam. Because, well, let's face it, they get dirty and dusty, and it's hard to pick up the rotation if you're able to pick it up in the first place. But now, from a pitching standpoint, I can tell you those are the ones that I love to throw because my grip was incredible on them. If you ever picked up a new baseball, you know they are slippery. They have to be rubbed down, of course, pregame, and then they're also rubbed down by the pitcher when they first get the new ball anyway. But those baseballs, way back in the day, back when Cy Young was playing, well, guess what? Pitchers were able to manipulate the ball through the use of maybe a spitball, for example. And also, many ballparks had large dimensions. So, advantage pitcher, you have to think about that. West Side grounds of the Chicago Cubs was 560 feet to the center field fence. Way back in the day, Huntington Avenue grounds for the Boston Red Sox, 635 feet. That's right, or 194 meters if you like metric. That's the center field. Home runs were very rare, and small ball tactics such as singles, bunts, stolen bases, hit and run, etc., that was really the strategy. And so small ball really comes from the fact that, hey, look, it's not everybody could really hit the ball 600 feet or anything like that. So hitting methods like the Baltimore chop were used to increase the number of infield singles. And on a successful Baltimore chop, the batter hits the ball forcefully into the ground, causing it to bounce so high that the batter reaches first before the ball can even come down and in time for the ball to be thrown to first. And so we see that sometimes when the ball bounces right off of home plate, right off the edge of home plate. It will sky way up in the air, or back in the day when they had AstroTurf. And now also, back in the day, they had the adoption of the foul strike rule. Way back in 1901 in the National League, in the American League 2 years later, quickly sent baseball from a high-scoring game to one where scoring runs became a struggle. And before this rule, foul balls were not counted as strikes, and a batter could foul off any number of pitches with no strikes counted against him. How do you like that? And this gave enormous advantages to the hitters. And so there was a lot going on way back in the day. And baseball became really popular in 1920s, 1930s, but you also had teams and rivalries that were set. And of course, think back to the murderer's row from the New York Yankees, and they won 27 World Series and all that stuff. And let's face it, these guys were really good. And look, in fact, by the end of the 1930s, the Yankees appeared already in 11 World Series and winning 8 of them. Guys like Babe Ruth, of course, single-season home run records, 1927, hitting 60 home runs with a beanbag with fences that were really, really far. And that would be George Herman Ruth, for all you that don't know. But you got to realize that the Great Depression had impacted baseball very negatively, and it really began a downward turn in the early 1930s. Basically, by 1932, only 2 major league teams turned a profit, and attendance had fallen, of course, due to, well, obviously, the part that nobody really had a bunch of money, and it basically was split almost in half. 10% federal amusement tax was added to baseball ticket prices on top of it. And so the roster was cut from 25 to 23 on top of it. And, of course, there was a lot going on that they couldn't really solve the problems. World War II era, a lot of things happened there. I mean, let's face it, some of the players, some of the teams, they had a lot of players lost during the war on top of it. So there were wartime blackout restrictions also. And it just made baseball very unpopular back then because people couldn't watch it, they couldn't listen to it, and it was really hard to go see it in the first place. There wasn't a lot of guys doing it. Then they had the big breakthrough, which the color barrier with Branch Rickey, president and general manager of the Brooklyn Dodgers, began making efforts to introduce a black baseball player to the previously all-white professional baseball league, which of course was Jackie Robinson. That's who they picked. And everybody knows the Jackie story is a great story. And so when you look at how baseball evolved all the way through that era, and baseball was evolving. Even we had women in baseball. They had, of course, they banned the sign the women in 1952, but the ban was lifted in 1992. And of course, there have been no female Major League Baseball players since that time. But there was expansion and relocation. From 1903 to 1952, Major League Baseball consisted of 2 8-team leagues, whose 16 teams were located in 10 cities, all in Northeast and Midwestern cities, including New York, Boston, Chicago, Philadelphia, St. Louis. Each had 2 teams. St. Louis was the southernmost and westernmost city with major league teams, and the longest possible road trip from Boston to St. Louis took about 24 hours by train. After half a century of stability starting in the 1950s, teams began to move out of cities with multiple teams into cities where they had basically no baseball and no competition. So from 1953 to 1955, 3 teams moved to new cities. Boston Braves, who my cousin Phil Macy played for, they became the Milwaukee Braves. The St. Louis Browns became the Baltimore Orioles, in case you're wondering. And the Philadelphia Athletics became the Kansas City Athletics. So there's a lot of movement. And why am I talking about movement? Look, I can go on and on and on with this, and I'm going to get to the real reason I'm talking about this right now. Because, look, baseball is very, very stable in the grand scheme of things. We've had stability for many, many, many years, and then we've had different commissioners come through and do different things. This current commissioner, who I am absolutely not a fan of, in fact, just because I can, I'll always give him an astounding round of boos. Because in my opinion, Rob Manfred is trying to put his stamp on the game, and what Rob Manfred, in my opinion, is doing is tinkering with the game to a point where it's becoming unacceptable. We've had baseballs that were allegedly compromised. As a matter of fact, home runs, when he took over, home runs went way up. In fact, they went up so high that it was said that they had to be reduced in, I guess, whatever method. In fact, they made them more lively because they started calling it the live ball era. So they reduced it down, and then baseball, or better yet, home runs were cut in half, essentially. And then they said, oh, nope, that's too much. Let's go ahead and gas these things back up again. And then the home runs jumped to double that number or something to the effect, whatever. So they've been tinkering with it. And by the way, folks, that same baseball for Major League Baseball is used in AAA baseball. So whether it's the Pacific League or this league or that league in AAA, guess what? They are using the same baseball with the same elements as Big League Baseball. A-ball and AA do not use that baseball. Then you wonder, well, geez, the power numbers are down in A-ball and AA. Wow, they went to AAA, and boy, those players really made a big splash. Of course, because they're hitting golf balls or super balls out there compared to the other balls that are used in A-ball and AA. There's a big, big difference. And why do they do that? There's a bunch of reasons that you could think of, and there's some that I can't think of, some that I can think of, maybe you can't. It doesn't matter. Either way, as I see it, it seems to me like the game of baseball has been terribly, terribly compromised. And when I say it's been compromised, folks, I'm talking about the bases are bigger. There's a pitch clock. There's only a certain amount of moves that a pitcher can make to try to pick off a runner. There are a ghost runner on second base in extra innings. I mean, they're playing Little League Baseball now. It's really embarrassing. All this stuff has happened during Rob Manfred's rule as the baseball commissioner. And there's a lot more coming, folks. And in the next segment, we're going to take a leap into something that I'm just finding appalling. And you probably will too if you're a baseball purist. Back here in a few minutes on the Sports Circus. Don't go anywhere.
My, isn't this an awkward moment?
Hey, bud, what's your problem?
I'm your ringmaster Sal of the Sports Circus, a primetime nationally syndicated television, radio, sports, and entertainment show. The Sports Circus covers topics others are too scared to talk about. There's no other primetime show like it on here that'll punch you in the face and you'll beg for more. Join me, Hall of Famers, world champions, and all-star celebrity guests for chaos and controversy here on Libsyn and all podcast platforms, plus thesportscircus.com. Remember, folks, it's a circus and we prove it every day.
Hello, Americans. It's Uncle Sam here. If you owe $10,000 or more in back taxes to the IRS or state, don't worry. I've got important news that may help you negotiate a lower tax bill. In today's economy, the IRS has released a variety of new rules and is offering more flexible terms to help Americans looking to settle their IRS debt. If you apply today, we may be able to lift your wage garnishments and release a freeze on your bank assets or business. Our team of tax professionals can resolve your case and stop collection actions against you. Even if you've been audited or haven't filed a return in years, they can help. Call right now and find out if you qualify to settle your IRS debt for far less than what you owe. Pick up your phone right now and call us for a free $500 IRS tax review. Don't wait. Here's the number.
Call right now. 800-950-2049. 800-950-2049. 800-950-2049. For the last time, that's 800-950-2049.
Do a search on how to get out of credit card debt, and you'll find everything from crazy promises to ways you can try to do it yourself. Many of those ideas just don't work, and they leave you broker than you were. Here's some advice. Call our debt helpline. In a quick and free 5-minute conversation, our experts will listen to you and learn about how much credit card debt you have, what your goals are, and then show you the right solution to help you get out of credit card debt with one new simple, affordable payment. The credit card companies make available special programs to help if you're struggling. All it takes for you to finally get out of credit card debt is one quick, free phone call. So please call right now.
800-948-6817. 800-948-6817. 800-948-6817. That's 800-948-6817. Paid for by the Debt Helpline.
Why pay retail for your next car? Just visit beepinautos.com to find your new-to-you car or truck. They find cars for people, even when cars are hard to find. So just go to beepinautos.com and click on Find Me a Car, and they find your perfect car on the wholesale market. Beepinautos.com. They're a car concierge. Beepinautos.com. B-E-E-P-I-N autos.com. Beepinautos.com. Now you have a friend in the car business when you need it most. Trusted since 2013. Just click Find Me a Car at beepinautos.com.
Welcome back to the Sports Circus. How do you not love that music? I'm Tom Brenneman.
Welcome back to the Sports Circus. I'm your ringmaster, Sal, live from Las Vegas in the AMP TV studio, AAMP television. Folks, make sure to check out thesportscircus.com for upcoming guests, our prior guests, record shows, which can be found on all streaming platforms, as well as make sure you check out the partners page. Listen, the partners page, lots of great partners over there. One of those is our favorite, and that's Al's Number One Italian Beef, 1079 West Taylor Street in Chicago's Little Italy. That's Al's Number One Italian Beef, 1079 West Taylor Street in Chicago's Little Italy. If you can't make it over there for some great food, check them out at alsbeef.com. That's alsbeef.com. You can read all about the creation of this incredible sandwich 117 years ago. They opened business in 1938, many years later, and they've been serving up great food ever since. Check them out, alsbeef.com. All right, welcome back to everybody. TV, radio, you know you are. Picking up with this Rob Manfred situation, and I mentioned Rob Manfred in the last segment in closing. Oh, by the way, real quick, if you're just tuning in right now and you missed it at the first break, actually, no, it was at the top of the show, we had an announcement from our friends over with Vacation Buddies, and they'd like to give you a couple of nights in Las Vegas, Orlando, Florida, or in Branson, Missouri. If you know the answer to a simple trivia question, I'm going to repeat it in case you're just tuning in and you missed it in the top of the show announcement. Which of these four NBA superstars won 6 NBA titles? Is it A, Magic Johnson, B, Larry Bird, C, Shaquille O'Neal, or D, Michael Jordan? If you know the answer, call 888-576-5777, 888-576-5777, 888-576-5777 for Vacation Buddies. Now, they're not affiliated with this station, but they want you to have some fun, do some traveling, and they'd like to give you a couple of nights in either Vegas, Orlando, or in Branson, Missouri, if you know the answer to that simple trivia question. If so, call 888-576-5777. All right, now back to this Rob Manfred thing. And the Rob Manfred thing that I'm referring to is, believe it or not, Rob Manfred's plan, or apparently his idea, or something of the sorts, is to realign Major League Baseball and their toughest divisions on top of that. Come on! What kind of garbage is this? Oh, yeah, this one's out there. Pick your favorite source. It doesn't matter who it is. It's reported by everybody and the Sports Circus. And, of course, realignment. Yes, it feels like it's an annual talking point for Major League Baseball Commissioner Rob Manfred, and he was at it again. He even talked about it during the Major League Baseball's Little League Classic, right? And that was in the not-so-distant past. And that was, in fact, between the Mets and Mariners way back when you may remember watching that or whatnot. It doesn't matter whether it's this year, last year, the year before. Who gives a damn? The point is he was talking about it. And, of course, this guy spoke about geographic realignment of Major League Baseball divisions. And he had said, quote, I think if we expand it, it provides up with an opportunity to geographically realign. I think we can save a lot of wear and tear on our players in terms of travel, and I think our postseason format would be even more appealing. And the owners realize that there's demand for Major League Baseball in a lot of great cities, and we have an opportunity to do something good around that expansion process, close quote. All right, so here's this expansion discussion. Realignment of the divisions is still a ways off, but the Philadelphia Phillies, for example, would be greatly impacted by changes to the National League East Division. And of course, according to The Athletic, their people, they dove into possible realignment scenarios. A couple of years ago, they did this. And listen, Manfred's idea for geographic realignment is if it's brought to fruition, it would see Philadelphia remain in an East Division, but the competition would immediately get tougher in this situation. So the Phillies technically, possibly, could wind up in Major League Baseball's toughest division. And they had thought, The Athletic had proposed the realignment idea would create 8 4-team divisions, with Charlotte and Nashville added as potential expansion franchises, organized by geography and broken into Eastern and Western conferences. And the Phillies would be a part of the East Division along with their current rivals, the New York Mets. And they also would potentially be joined by the Yankees and Red Sox. Did I hear that right, or did I read that right? Now, why would they do that? Because that would take away the great possibility of World Series between maybe the Mets and Yankees, or the Phillies and Yankees, or something to that effect. And I think that would be 100% wrong. What about the Mets and the Red Sox? Right? We've already seen that one, and that was the 1986 World Series. But nonetheless, when you think about what they could do, it is mind-boggling to even assume or to think. Look, the first thing to note about the new East Division is that basically you can kiss the rivalry goodbye with the Atlanta Braves. And the other thing to note is that it would look like the group of death, to borrow lingo from FIFA's World Cup draws, and that would be no small market payroll teams to beat up on either. No more Miami to beat up on, no more Washington to beat up on. Lumping the Phillies, Mets, Yankees, and Red Sox together would pit 4 of the top 9 and 3 of the top 5 current active 26-man roster payrolls against each other. You'd also get 3 of the top 4 total payroll teams in there at the same time, with Boston being, well, basically the lowest one at number 12. But when you look at the current payrolls of each team, this is a whole nother discussion, because the payrolls themselves dictate a whole different discussion on this. Because you say, well, why is it significant to talk about payroll? Well, look, it's manpower against manpower. And that's really how you have to look at it. That's probably the best way to look at it. Because in today's time, when they spend such crazy amounts of money on payroll, you say, okay, it's kind of like we could buy these players, but at some point we're going to pay a luxury tax. But guess what? We're going to have the best that money could buy. And when you look at what the San Diego Padres did at the previous trade deadline, how they basically just emptied the wallets, they basically dealt everything off they could in a win-now mentality. So the rankings currently stand with the Mets as the number 1 payroll allocation in baseball, active. 26-man roster, just under $300 million, 290, we'll round up, $298 million. Philadelphia, $238 million, rounding down. The Dodgers, $231.5 million, number 3. The Blue Jays, $205 million. Now, got to tell you, I wasn't really expecting to see the Blue Jays there. The Yankees at $195 million. Imagine this. The Mets are $100+ million higher than the New York Yankees. And remember, it is the the Yankees that were, in my opinion, they were smart in dumping the Juan Soto deal. So the Mets went and spent $770 million on Juan Soto, he's a good player. I got him on my fantasy baseball team, whatever in the past. But I don't know about that kind of money, folks. And there's the Padres at $30 million less than the Yankees, 160, we'll call it $668 million. Rangers 165, Cubs 159, the Red Sox 154, right? And so we'll just kind of stop right there, and Atlanta 130. So that's the top 10. And so the total payroll allocations are a little bit different. And there's also an injured amount, and then there's a retained amount. The injured amount, the highest injured out of the top 10 is the Atlanta Braves, because, boy, they've had their woes. And that's why, well, you didn't see too great a performance in 2025 with the Atlanta Braves. But nonetheless, the other teams, the Texas Rangers had the same problem, but it was the Dodgers that led the world when it come to injured players and payroll. They had $81 million in 2025 alone. But when you look at these statements that they're talking about, oh, by the way, if you're looking at the bottom, yes, it is the Washington Nationals at the very bottom of payroll, and with the A's, the Miami Marlins. So two of those teams, two of the bottom three teams are from that National League East. That's why this is important, because when the Athletic and the powers that be start talking about, well, you can't beat up on these little teams anymore with small payrolls, right? And that's the issue there. They said, well, needless to say, this division would be a dogfight from opening day through 162. Maybe they may have the money. It would be a dogfight at the bank for the ATM line or for the deposit or withdrawal line. I don't necessarily believe it would be a dogfight in the grand scheme of things on a day-to-day basis, because the teams are made up differently with different philosophies. Now, remember, none of those four teams have won a World Series for the last several years. In fact, Boston was the last team to do it, but the Phillies and the Yankees have been in the World Series. They just haven't won anything. And so you ask yourself, is the desperation there? Well, it sure seems like it, because the Mets spend a bunch of money on baseball and budgeting. So as we look at these divisions, we say, what are the rest going to potentially look like? So they're saying, well, the Phillies this, the Phillies that, as if the Phillies are the favored team in the media standpoint. And I got no love for the Phillies, and I don't really think that's a fair argument. They have some pieces, and they have a lot of pieces, generally speaking, year in, year out, but they just don't deliver. All right, back here with the rest of the league in just a few minutes on the Sports Circus.
Do you know someone with a drug or alcohol problem? Get help right now. Insurance may cover everything. Stop the drug and alcohol nightmare. Are drug and alcohol problems hitting you too close to home? Get help right now. Insurance may cover everything.
800-831-1560. 800-831-1560. 800-831-1560. That's 800-831-1560.
Why pay retail for your next car? Just visit beepinautos.com to find your new-to-you car or truck. They find cars for people, even when cars are hard to find. So just go to beepinautos.com and click on Find Me a Car, and they find your perfect car on the wholesale market. Beepinautos.com. They're a car concierge. Beepinautos.com. BEEPIN autos.com. Beepinautos.com. Now you have a friend in the car business when you need it most. Trusted since 2013. Just click Find Me a Car at beepinautos.com.
Can your IRA stand up to the next financial crisis that our top economists are saying is at our doorsteps? By allocating a percentage of your IRA into physical gold and silver with a tax-free rollover, you can diversify and safeguard your holdings from turbulent markets and economic downturns by putting your IRA back on the gold standard. Find out how to safeguard your assets with a tax-free rollover with a Genesis Gold IRA, the only IRA that can hold physical precious metals. Call now for your free gold and silver report. Protect your IRA today. Don't let your retirement accounts get caught off guard by trade and tariff wars. Learn why a Genesis Gold IRA is the number one choice for thousands of Americans across the nation. 800-709-4423. 800-709-4423. 800-709-4423. That's 800-709-4423.
Do a search on how to get out of credit card debt, and you'll find everything from crazy promises to ways you can try to do it yourself. Many of those ideas just don't work, and they leave you broker than you were. Here's some advice. Call our debt helpline. In a quick and free 5-minute conversation, our experts will listen to you and learn about how much credit card debt you have what your goals are, and then show you the right solution to help you get out of credit card debt with one new simple, affordable payment. The credit card companies make available special programs to help if you're struggling. All it takes for you to finally get out of credit card debt is one quick, free phone call. So please call right now.
800-948-6817. 800-948-6817. 800-948-6817. That's 800-948-6817. Paid for by the Debt Helpline.
Hey everybody, this is Brian Urlacher. Welcome back to the Sports Circus.
Welcome back to the Sports Circus. I'm your ringmaster, Sal, live from Las Vegas in the MTV studio, AAMP Television. Folks, again, make sure you check out thesportscircus.com for our upcoming guests and prior guests and all of our recorded shows, which you found on all streaming platforms. Also, check out the store. Lots of great items at thesportscircus.com store. And there's a tab right across the top. It says store. Click on it for hats, hoodies, t-shirts, coats, pants, and mouse pads and travel mugs and coffee mugs and all kinds of neat stuff. Pillows even. Check it out, the sportscircus.com store. Mention Ringmaster Sal for an extra 10% off of all items. All right. All right, thanks for everybody listening on all of our network affiliates and all of our radio stations for TV and radio, that is. And everybody streaming on Pick Your Favorite Streamer. Back here talking baseball and Rob Manfred's possibility, yes, of realignment. Oh, boy. Now, The Athletic has stepped in and made all kinds of accusations about this, that, and the other, along with the New York Times. And we're going to go ahead and credit the New York Times on this because it's actually a story through them with The Athletic as the cited source. So they stated from a broadcast booth in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, baseball commissioner Rob Manfred stoked the flames of expansion talks by saying adding 2 teams would give the league, quote, an opportunity to geographically realign, close quote. Now, that's news when the commissioner says it publicly, but impending realignment has not been closely guarded secret, as we know. So expanding to 32 teams would necessitate some reshuffling, the most likely of which would be moving to 8 divisions of 4 apiece. I don't know about that. Boy, I don't like that, but I get it. I know where they're going here. So let's go back to when the Athletic had essentially redrawn divisional lines just some years ago. And they imagined Manfred ditching the American National League labels altogether and adopting an Eastern and Western Conference, kind of like hockey has, for example. So, of course, in the version, the most geographically approximate teams became division rivals: Mets, Yankees, Dodgers, Angels, Cubs, Sox, Royals, and Cardinals, Marlins, Rays, Orioles, Nats. So there may be a simpler way to realign divisions without changing league names or disrupting traditional rivalries like Cubs, Cards, Dodgers, Giants in the name of shaving off a few airline miles. But before you pull up a map and start sketching out your own division, understand that it's entirely normal to spiral onto this topic because that's all people like to talk about. Hey, let's change this, let's change. I'm a traditionalist. I don't like to see change at all. I mean, I don't like a pitch clock. I don't like bigger bases. I don't like limits to move to pick runners off. I don't like any of that crap. So that said, when realigning to 8 4-team divisions, the idea, 20-odd years ago, look, think back, the NFL announced 7 possible realignment scenarios. So when they did it, yeah, that was many years ago. So the one ultimately chosen made the league's footprint more sensible without moving many teams. Jacksonville, Tennessee, Houston, Atlanta, Carolina, New Orleans, Tampa were assigned to the newly created South divisions that Indianapolis moved to the AFC South because Miami refused. And of course, it's a reminder that no realignment will make complete sense anyway. And it's the same idea, why the hell does Dallas in Division X when they should be in Division Y? It's one of those kind of things. Why are they in the East when they certainly should be in the NFC South? Whatever. Anyway, and when you think about the only one team, the Seattle Seahawks, really changed conferences. So that was the NFL. So that's the approach that some used in realigning baseball's 8 division, keeping the American National League's protected division rivals as well, and just to clean things up geographically while moving as few teams as necessary. And this is what they put together. Now, over in the American League West, now remember, it used to be just the East and West, but in the American League West, they've got Seattle, the Angels, the Las Vegas Athletics, and then possibly Portland, new team, or Salt Lake City, new team. I would think Portland makes a little bit more sense there. Now, over in the new division, the American League South, it would have Colorado going from the National League West to the American League South, Kansas City going from the American League Central to the American League South, and Texas and Houston staying in the same division. In the South, that is. Now, the American League North, just like we have in football, it'd be a little bit different. We would have the Minnesota Twins, the White Sox, the Detroit Tigers, and the Cleveland, I want to call them the Indians, but they're the Guardians. That would make up the AL North. When you think about football, it's Minnesota, Detroit, Chicago, Green Bay. Well, Green Bay doesn't have a baseball team, so they swap out, of course. But the former Indians in the American League North, and in the East, it'd be Toronto, New York, Boston, Baltimore. They all stay together. So that one kind of makes a little bit sense, right? So you have a couple of teams. Basically, you have a new Portland or Salt Lake team. Colorado and Kansas City shift into the South. And that's really what happens there. So we'll say, yeah, a couple of teams are moving, but only one team is changing leagues. So now over in the National League, what they proposed, it's crazy if you look at the National League, their map, because there is a gigantic void through the Rocky Mountains. No teams in the Rocky Mountains whatsoever. So in the National League West, you would have San Francisco, the Giants, Dodgers, Padres, and the Diamondbacks, all in one division, which they're already in one division right now anyway. But there's nothing for, we'll say, 1,500 miles. It's about 1,500 miles. There's no baseball being played in the National League. Over in the National League North, it's the Cubs, Cards, Reds, and Brewers, which they all share the same division right now anyway, so that doesn't change. However, in the National League East, the Pittsburgh Pirates go to the East along with, they play with the Mets, the Phillies, and the Nationals. So those 3 teams stay the same. It's the division change for the Pittsburgh Pirates, which geographically makes a little bit of sense. Now you have the newly created National League South. That would pit Miami, Tampa. Tampa switches leagues. And Atlanta. And then you would have a new franchise in either Nashville or Raleigh. Now, what makes more sense, it would probably be Nashville, because Nashville is one of America's fastest growing cities. And let's face it, they already have hockey, they already have football, they already have nearby basketball in Memphis. So Nashville would make a little bit of sense, because Raleigh, what do they have? They have hockey. And then the nearest football team is in Charlotte. So it would make sense for Nashville, because Nashville is a bigger metropolitan area than Raleigh-Durham. And so that would probably happen there. So as you look at these divisions, you say, all right, who are the winners? Let's go back to the American League. Who are the winners in this? Well, I would say that Colorado is not a winner, because, boy, they're going into a tough division with a good Kansas City team on the upswing, a loaded Houston team, and a loaded Texas team. Boy, Colorado has really dealt a bad hand there. And over in the West, you've got one good team, out of all of those, and that would be Seattle. But then you'll have a new franchise in Portland or Salt Lake City. Likely it's going to be Portland for proximity to a nearby rivalry. It makes a little bit of sense because the distance between Vegas and Salt Lake City is about 400 plus miles. We'll call it 450 miles. Well, why wouldn't you put a rivalry, a team over in Portland, which is only about a 2-hour drive, maybe between Seattle and Portland? That makes sense. So between Anaheim and Las Vegas is, well, for me, it's a 3-hour and 5-minute drive. I do that drive on a regular basis. So really the weak division is going to be the American League West. And the American League East is basically made up of the same teams that's there already, minus who? We're missing one team. We have Toronto, Boston, New York, and Baltimore. I think we're missing somebody. It doesn't matter. The point is, yeah, we are missing somebody. But the point in all of this is that they stay the same. The North, the newly created North, basically stays the same. Of course, they lose one team. But, end of day, they're losing the Royals. But really, all we're after here is what does the league really look like? Over in the National League, so that's the winners in the American League or the American League West, no question. And so it was Tampa Bay was over in the American League East. That's what we're missing. But over in the National League, you've got the same four with San Francisco, LA, San Diego, Arizona. Good division right there. The North would be Milwaukee, Chicago, St. Louis, Cincinnati. Good division there. And the East has technically Pittsburgh migrates over to the East with the Mets, the Phillies, and the Nats. Well, that's the same teams, basically. And then you have the newly created, which is the South, which has Miami and Tampa, a pretty close rivalry there, and a good Atlanta baseball team. And then you have a questionable team between Nashville or Raleigh, which will probably be Nashville. But I would argue that that would be the weakest division, being the National League South. So the expansion divisions in the South and the National League and the West in the American League would likely be the weakest divisions, only because they have the expansion teams and they have a couple of weak teams. And so right now, Miami is not really a strong team. And you look at the American League West, right now the Athletics are not that good of a team. The Angels are not that good of a team. And Seattle dominates a lot of other clubs. So that would be Seattle's division for quite some time. I think, again, the Rockies are dealt the worst hand out of everybody because they have to go into a loaded division with Kansas City and Houston and Texas. I mean, that almost seems remarkably unfair. But then again, as we look through the American League and the National League, we say, well, why do we have this really large void in the midsection of the country? Because really, the fact is, it's Colorado and Kansas City are the only teams that really are within this area as far as the Rocky Mountains out to the Great Plains. That's it. Because there's nothing in North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska. And you've got to remember, in the state of Kansas, what do we have? Well, we got the Kansas City Royals play in Kansas City, Missouri. There's really nothing going on in the state of Kansas. And you have one baseball team in Colorado, nothing in New Mexico. And let's face it, there is nothing in Wyoming or Montana either. There's an enormous void for Major League Baseball. Maybe they ought to consider those locations just to pick up the gap. Anyway, folks, we're out of time here on The Circus. We'll see you in about 23 hours right here on your favorite station. Until then, so long, everyone.
If I was your mother and you had a drug problem, I'd grab you by the ear and make you call and get help. You can be in treatment tomorrow and start to get clean in 7 days. Follow Mom's advice and call the Detox and Treatment Helpline now. Write this number down.
800-814-8628. 800-814-8628. 800-814-8628. That's 800-814-8628.
Why pay retail for your next car? Just visit beepinautos.com to find your new-to-you car or truck. They find cars for people, even when cars are hard to find. So just go to beepinautos.com and click on Find Me a Car, and they find your perfect car on the wholesale market. Beepinautos.com. They're a car concierge. Beepinautos.com. BEEPIN autos.com. Beepinautos.com. Now you have a friend in the car business when you need it most. Trusted since 2013. Just click Find Me a Car at beepinautos.com.